Our next presentation, I'm John Halamka. I am the Chief Information Officer of Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. And I have with me Michael Idelchik, and Michael is the VP for Advanced Technologies at General Electric Corporation. In my role at Beth Israel Deaconess, I oversee 7 petabytes of patient-identified data delivered to 22,000 users over about 50,000 different devices, and I'm accountable for ensuring the data integrity and security of every byte. And I wanted to start off with, as we bring together cybersecurity and digital health, the context and the challenge. In the United States, we spend 17% of our gross domestic product on healthcare. We have more healthcare than any other country in the world. It's just not the best healthcare. And whether it's President Obama or President Trump, as Jonathan Bush said, our imperative is to start to bend that cost curve. And how are we going to bend that cost curve? Well, the answer is we're going to share more data with more people for more reasons, while keeping it totally secure. And let me actually give you a few stories which Kevin Tabb is familiar with, all true from our experience in Boston, which describes some of the challenges. Dr. Famous, not his real name, goes down to the Apple store on Boylston Avenue and buys a brand new MacBook Pro, delightful machine, comes back to his office, unplugs the desktop, plugs in the MacBook, and downloads 119,000 email. Now, the fact that he had 119,000 email, that itself was disturbing. Closes the lid, goes to a meeting, comes back, the MacBook is gone. Calls me up and says, you know, my MacBook with some patient data has been stolen, but don't worry, I used a password. Now, that's the same as encryption, right? No, actually. He says, well, it's pretty easy to figure out what we lost because I actually back up all my patient data on Dropbox. It's like, oh my God. Really wrecked my day. Well, that began a year-long journey that has now cost over $1 million in forensics, media management, lawyers, etc. Now, why so much? Well, if we have 119,000 emails to go through, how do you even decide what constitutes a breach of privacy? Suppose, and here I'll pick on Michael. Michael, you know, I have an email that says, Michael has ingrown toenails. Not that you do. Well, there are a lot of Michaels in the world. So such an email wouldn't constitute a breach. But if it says, Michael, that famous innovator from General Electric has ingrown toenails, well, then maybe an intelligent person could figure out the Michael. We had to hire 30 FTEs, 30 employees, to read 119,000 emails and classify every email as to what information was disclosed and whether it was a breach or not. And try automating that, right? Really hard. So real event, real cost, real problem. I can't control every clinician's behavior and what they buy and what they connect and how they work. And in the last session, over in our cybersecurity session, we all recognized, and Margulies at Harvard, some folks from Akamai, that the reality of people buying their own devices and bringing them into your environment is something that you'll never be able to control. So there's problem 1. BYOD, devices you can't control. Second story for you. And who would have expected this to happen? It's the eve of the Boston Marathon in 2014. Right? We had the bombings 2013. 2014, we're all a little paranoid. A tweet, yes, a tweet, strange thing to happen, goes to the CIO of Children's Hospital from the hacktivist group Anonymous, saying, we are going to take you down. There was a question of social injustice. There was an issue with a patient, and Anonymous decided to attack Children's Hospital. Only problem was Anonymous didn't know the IP address of Children's Hospital or really the network space it controlled, so it began a 20 gig per second denial of service attack that took down the Brigham, the Beth Israel Deaconess, the Dana-Farber, the Joslin, Children's, and Harvard University. On the eve of the marathon in 2014, no hospital in Boston could communicate outside its own firewall. Now, rapidly in the middle of the night, we mitigated that, and it was all fine for the Boston Marathon. But again, as we build digital health solutions, who thinks about hacktivists attacking your network? MIT students maybe, but hacktivists, no. Another example for you. Turns out not only do we have doctors and staff connected to our network, we have thousands of devices. And Michael will be addressing this in a minute. Now, not GE, of course, because you guys have figured all this out, but many device companies who are concerned about FDA approval, Food and Drug Administration approval, don't necessarily update and patch their medical devices. So yes, there are CT scanners still running Windows 95. You remember that? How long, and you guys may know, does it take for an average Windows 95 machine connected on the internet to be compromised? Less than 30 minutes. So what happened? We isolate every device in the hospital and would never allow a medical device to get anywhere near the internet. We are not allowed to service such devices because they are FDA approved and certified. So the company sends Bob. Bob comes in and says, oh, this device needs an update, and Bob connects the device to the internet. Remember, it's Windows 95. Bob goes to lunch, comes back, 2,000 patient records from that device had been uploaded to a site in China. This was probably not a directed attack, it's just the usual malware on the internet. But again, what began was about a $500,000 investigation, forensics, media management, and legal, because Bob connected a medical device to the internet. And ultimately, it was decided Beth Deaconess and Harvard was not to blame at all for this. It was the device manufacturer. But we were admonished, if Bob ever shows up again, you better follow him. So again, a real problem. Now, you're all very smart people, so hey, Lewis, if I send you the following email, you now password change, and I use a couple of different fonts, maybe some different colors, and I give you the URL, changemypassword.Nigeria. Would you click on that? Yeah. But yet, because sometimes in IT we're evil people, we sent such an email to a number of clinicians. And let's just say about a third of people who received the email clicked on it. Despite education and training, humans are still vulnerable. And there are some very sophisticated phishing emails like that going around today. That UPS package you're not expecting, etc. And so we, of course, had to redouble our efforts to education as well as put in technical solutions to prevent the clicking of such emails. And finally, there's not only the external hacker, there's not only this device risk, but there's the internal user. So Kevin led the organization in the aftermath of the Boston Marathon. And of course, what we were very concerned about is the nurse, the doctor, the staff member who, out of interest of safety, might be looking at data on internal systems they probably shouldn't be looking at. A different kind of threat. The authorized internal user, how do you prevent inappropriate access, track that access, take sanctions, immediately shut it down. Different kind of problem. So hopefully what I've outlined in just these 5 stories is we have to share more data with more people for more purposes, but the nature of the threats is increasingly a challenge. Cyber criminals, the Internet of Things and devices, your internal users, and the fact that we all want to carry these inside our workplaces and use the same device for business that we just use to play Angry Birds. A real challenge. But Michael, I'm sure you have perspectives on Internet of Things, on patient-generated healthcare data, and the challenges we face. Please.
I don't have a prepared stories like that. Those are unique.
Okay.
But I bet you that from all the pedophile data you generate at the hospital, the imaging data probably 60 to 70% easily. Easily. And this data should be encrypted. The name should be encrypted. But it represents really a wealth of information. and the next level of innovation in image analytics will come from that data. So we need to make it secure and safe for innovation. At the same time, we need to understand how this data was moved and cared for, maybe changed. So we're looking at a number of technologies from encryption, all the way, from simple encryption to double key encryption to quantum encryption, and then employing technology like blockchain to be able to understand the custody transfer of the data. In order to create a marketplace for us where people can innovate and create new applications in imaging data, we need to create this marketplace in a way. So just bear with me for a second. I'm going to give you kind of a synopsis of what it means. If I look today at a number of codes in radiology in US, it's almost 10,000 codes. So the 10,000 different diagnoses done by radiologists today. Some of them done by cardiologists, some of them done by neurologists, but it's close to 10,000. So GE is a big company, but we know that we're not going to be the ones who are going to innovate 10,000 diagnoses to help radiologists, neurologists, cardiologists to be more efficient in doing their work. So it is really ripe for innovation area, and we need to create more or less a marketplace where people can put their data. It has to be good data, and that's another challenge. What data is good? How well annotated the data is? And in the second one, people who put in well annotated data want to get paid. People who are going to create applications want to get paid. So how do you create a marketplace which allows people to share data and come up with applications which at the end of the day will reduce cost of healthcare? It's kind of interesting. US does spend more than any other country as percent of GDP on healthcare, and US administrative cost of healthcare is the highest in the world. So numbers I heard like 32+%. But even at 30%, what tools do we need to create to drive this number down, to have much more automation and much less paper handling within the system? So that's kind of a big challenge for GE. How do we create a marketplace where people can innovate? And how do we become, I would say, destination of choice to distribute those applications? We're going to do some ourselves, but we're going to really look at many innovative companies on both on data side to understand, is it a good data? How good is the data? And on developing really novel solutions in image analytics. Back to devices, John, it's kind of some CTs are around for over 10 years. So are MR. And hospitals are really reluctant to invest in upgrades because system works. And it is, Windows 95. And I've been here, what was that? I've been here 4 years ago when we started our security team here, cybersecurity team here. And I was amazed by one gentleman getting into the CT machine somewhere in Europe, and I want to tell you which machine it was, within 20 minutes. Literally in front of me, within 20 minutes, he was in the machine. It kind of shook me up, personally. Was it 5 years? 5 years ago. We've done a lot of work from a company side to make sure it's just we are protected as a company and as protecting the patients. But that's not going to stop here. I mean, the threats are evolving. Technology need to be ahead of it. And having really a more comprehensive strategy on data security and device security. It's really, it's not only GE issue. It's really industry issue. And we want to play our role in it, absolutely. Inside of GE, we actually have different layers of data security. I don't know if hospitals do it today, but we don't treat all the data the same. There's a data which we consider to be crown jewels. There's a data which is business critical. And in a way, I expect that next generation of hospital systems, I don't know, John, where you are on this, will have similar designations as you treat your data and how you treat it. Again, from encryptions to custody transfer and understanding what data went through, today's technologies are very interesting. We would love to figure out how to run analytics inside of a blockchain. Anybody has any ideas? That will be phenomenal, guys. This will be absolutely phenomenal. So using encryption, blockchain, other security protocols and ideas to be able to understand really custody transfer. For me, data only, most of the time I should say, majority of the time, data is compromised when custody is transferred. Yeah? I think your fundamental perimeter, if we call it today, is secured, is when the data moves. Like when the gentleman took the data and downloaded it on his computer. That's the custody transfer. Yeah? So that's how we look at data. It's a journey for us, a journey for entire industry. Innovation here will be critical to enable digital health. And the FDA actually working through the same challenges as we go forward.
So let me just react to a few of the things Michael talked about. Because, of course, we are a delegation today from Massachusetts. It turns out that Massachusetts is the world leader in the development of blockchain in healthcare. Recently, the federal government held a challenge for exactly what you just suggested. How is it we'd adopt this technology traditionally used for Bitcoin and financial exchange for healthcare, and Massachusetts won the challenge. And this particular paper was a collaboration between MIT and Beth Israel Deaconess. And what did we do? Well, if you think about what is blockchain, I mean, so it's a encrypted set of pointers often used in financial transactions. And look at your bank account. It's a set of deposits and withdrawals. At the end of the month, you know your balance. Well, think about the medications you get from your doctor. Well, when you get a new medication, that's like a deposit. When you have a medication that's discontinued, it's a withdrawal. And therefore, at the end of the month, your balance is what you're actually taking. So that's what we built. And we actually put it into production, and we used the Beth Israel Deaconess live clinical data and blockchain. We happened to use the MIT engineers Media Lab implementation of Ethereum blockchain. And so paper is available, and I can certainly circulate the URL. So these kinds of technologies and ideas are absolutely possible in collaboration in Massachusetts. Now, you also talked about the need to share data and images securely. And so we have a number of companies in Massachusetts focused on cloud sharing, particularly of image data. This is really challenging because Beth Israel Deaconess today has about 450 different unique billing locations. And what that means is doctors, north, south, east, and west, we need to share images. And of course, it's mostly GE. But occasionally there are Philips and Siemens and AGFA and a few other companies. Yeah. And so we have to be vendor neutral in our approach of sharing data securely across the enterprise so the patients don't have replicated MRIs or CTs. And so our answer, put them in the cloud, and with a vendor neutral technology, be able to view those images from the cloud. Now, you also use the term inside the perimeter. So here's a challenge. In healthcare, we no longer have a perimeter. And why? Well, if we are going to keep you healthy in your home as opposed to treat you when you're sick, I actually need to know your blood glucose, your blood pressure, how your breathing's doing in your bed at home. And that means the Internet of Things now reaches from your home into my network. And it means that we're exchanging bidirectional data with patients. I'm asking you, how are you feeling today? What's your mood? So it's a completely different paradigm. We've moved from the closed perimeter, the controlled devices, to now assuming it's like Starbucks. There's a wireless access point and we're sharing data to and fro, and we simply have to watch for badness. And I'm not sure there is any notion of keeping it out, because out of where? So it's a challenge. And finally, he mentioned data classification, and he's absolutely right. This is hard business. So Jason, I'll pick on you. I am going to tell this group, You had a flu shot this year. I don't know how you feel about that. Now, on the other hand, let's take some other elements that he, by the way, doesn't have in his medical record, so I'm making this up. But in the medical record, potentially, could be an HIV test result, or such things as a sexually transmitted disease, domestic violence, mental health, substance abuse, right? Think about the data we have to protect and how that classification is so important. So what have we done at Beth Israel Deaconess? We actually, over the last 2 years, have thought about new and novel ways to build metadata around the data itself, classifying the nature of that data so we can put on extra layers of protection. So everything he has talked about, these are real technology problems that we need to solve, and it isn't just unique to Massachusetts. They're the same around the world. Other comments?
So data classification and the metadata, so data actually can be put in the right place. That's a whole technology evolution we need to, innovation evolution we need to get through. We're doing it internally within GE, but it's a lot of hard work by many people, and scalability of this technology to, kind of go into the homes and understand from FDA-approved devices. What is a blood sugar level? What is a heartbeat? What is a what is a barometric pressure in a house at the same time? It's actually two different layers of security in how we handle it. So we need a bunch of innovation in the different domains of data management. Custody transfer for me so applicable to healthcare for blockchain because it was designed for custody transfer. It was designed for redundancy, and it was designed for understanding what actually happened and how account is being rebalanced. So we like what's happening in Massachusetts. Most of you know we have now headquarters in Massachusetts. It was done not only because a couple of staff members actually been educated in Massachusetts. It was really done because it's an innovation ecosystem. And the headquarters is being built to really have not just headquarter function, but really encourage much more collaboration, much more incubation, use cases with new companies. Because we can bring the new use cases which actually real and have business opportunity on another side if company is successful. And we're going to be working very closely, and are working very closely in Israel, in the US with a number of startups, especially in this domain. The digital healthcare cannot happen without security. It's just not going to happen. And having those two together is a key. That's why I think this entire meeting combining digital health and security so appropriate.
And then one last comment, and then we'll open it up to some questions from you guys. Ann Margulies, the CIO of Harvard, and I were speaking a few minutes ago, and both of us believe that within 5 years we actually won't run data centers anymore. That is, instead of being an organization that procures servers and VMware and devices, we will provision cloud-hosted services, and our roles as CIOs will actually be just integrators and change managers and project managers and not technologists. So this actually creates an interesting new risk. So I go to Jeff Bezos. By the way, it's a Seattle-based company, so we're not interested in Amazon. And I say, Jeff, will you host the Beth Israel Deaconess 2 million patient records? Absolutely. Will you sign a business associate agreement and ensure privacy? Absolutely. Will you indemnify me for millions of dollars if you spill that data? Nope. And so what do I do with this new realm of cloud-hosted services? I talk to Lloyd's of London and buy cyber liability insurance to cover the cloud. So this will be our interesting challenge. More and more services from more and more companies with legal protection, but no indemnification against breach. It's a challenge. And maybe GE can solve it.
No, we completely agree with you. It's, as we're developing industrial internet and we're actually hosting our customer data, in not only healthcare, but how engine is working, continuously, how turbine is working in a power generation world, jet engine flying from Israel back to United States. All this data has to be protected. It doesn't have the same level of sensitivity as human data and healthcare data, but for many customers it's very sensitive data. The oil reserve is a very sensitive data for many companies in the world. So how do we, understanding reservoirs, how do we protect this data? So we're facing the same challenges.
So the challenges are the same all over the world, and working together, Israel and Massachusetts can solve them. And so let me open it up to some questions you might have. Because now, Jason, I think we are running a little bit behind, but a couple of questions, okay? 2 minutes, okay. Yes?
Federal regulations around data sharing, is that a help or a problem? And what's the likelihood that it will be dealt with?
So the governor has asked this very important question. Regulations, help or hurt? And so I probably have a controversial answer to that for you, which is our federal regulatory framework, HIPAA, in some ways helps because it tells me when I can share data and what I have to do to share it. One challenge, however, is state law preempts HIPAA, and that is our states can actually make policies that are even more stringent than HIPAA if they so choose. And what the Baker administration is doing is now issuing regulatory guidance that actually specifies for innovators and hospital and healthcare organizations how they can share data more fluidly while also respecting patient preferences. So I think the answer to that is we have a federal framework, but it's actually the state sub-regulatory guidance your administration is delivering in January that will really help. Other questions?
That wasn't a setup, but
Other questions, issues, challenges?
how do you deal with the device question?
Sure. So there's multiple ways of thinking about devices. So certainly with Beth Israel Deaconess internally, if a doctor picks up such a device, there are several immediate concerns we have. So Michael, I am now going to take your photograph. Now that has just appeared on the iCloud. How do you feel about that? Well, oh, it's just a photograph here. Now I'm taking a photograph of the mole on your thigh. You know, we have had to create an application that prevents the doctor's phones from storing photographs locally to their phone or uploading them to Apple. And so that happens to be an application called Photo Consult. We're actually open sourcing it for the entire community so that the data about you is uploaded from your phone to our secure medical record systems, deleted from your phone before it ever leaves your phone to go to the iCloud. And that's just one example of how you have to control mobile devices. As well as we connect patients' devices, we're now having to deal with how good is that data? What do you do with it? I now have 10,000 normal blood pressures. I'm not sure how to handle that. So we're having to now build new technologies and policies about how to show data to doctors and hospitals where there's critical variance, and telling those doctors and hospitals where the data came from and if it can be trusted. And any comments you'd make?
It's very actually similar. For us, if you look at engine flying across the Atlantic, it's boring. And we love it to be this way. It's boring, nothing happened, everybody got to where they want to go. We have 12 hours of data, terabytes of data, everything's fine. So what do you do with this data? I mean, you don't want to store all this data, there's really no need. You want to transfer this data, get key parameters, which are important, either for hot section lifing or for key KPI, and the rest of the data can go. There's really no reason to keep it.
And so he's just given a perfect example. Healthcare and jet engines, same problem.
Same problem.
And so this is not just a single industry question. So this is why I look so forward to our collaborations, Massachusetts to Israel, and jet engines in healthcare. So thank you, and we'll be around. Thanks.